Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the Ace of Spada podcast, hosted by your boy right here, Anthony Spada. Man, this is the first time creating an intro on video, so we're gonna make a good run at this. Before we get into the episode, I want to make a few quick announcements. If you guys don't know, I do run a coaching business, and if you guys are interested in becoming an ace in the deck of cards known as life, you get weekly accountability, customized training and nutrition, 24/7 access to me. You get looked at for training videos, which is something a lot of coaches do not offer, but I will help you make sure you get the most out of your workouts every single time, most out of your results. And so if you want to work together and make the mindset and the body become an ace in the deck of cards known as life, click the link down in the show notes. There's a coaching application down there. And secondly, you guys all know I work with Morphogen Nutrition. I had Ben on the show. Couldn't be more thrilled to team up with them. And for that, for all the listeners, we offer a 10% discount off all their supplements. If you use code SPADA, you will get that 10% off. Free shipping, third-party tested supplements, nothing better in the industry. I can guarantee that. So, guys, welcome to the episode, and I'll see you inside. All right, Josh, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you on. Like I mentioned right before we started recording, is I never had someone who deals with sports performance training and how it's actually different than stuff I've previously talked about, which mainly is surrounding bodybuilding. That's kind of the way that I do it, or just general fitness. It's completely a different aspect than a lot of people realize, and it's a lot more serious, especially to the people who you are training. So kind of just want to welcome you onto the show. I kind of want to get an introduction. How did you actually get into performance training, especially with the like I mentioned,
I am
the
a
NFL
former
athletes?
Division I college athlete myself.
Okay.
I think a lot of people that are in the sports performance realm are in the same boat as me. Played Division I football at Louisiana Tech University. Had a mini camp invite to the Seahawks. Actually tore my ACL at that invite back in 2013, and that was the end of any NFL aspirations that I could have. But with that being said, it kind of started me on the journey that I'm on now, working with athletes, and it kind of propelled me to my career versus I have a lot of people, semi-pro athletes or Arena League or CFL or free agents that I don't want to say you got to close the album, but they don't close the album to get into the real world. So since that happened, I was able to go back to graduate school, get my master's, do my internships, work with some phenomenal coaches along the way to start my own career, right? Had I bounced around on a practice squad or whatever, then I'd have, at this point, I'd have 8 years less experience in the training world as I do now. So it's almost like I obviously went to school and spent a lot of money on education, but I've also been able to acquire years of hands-on experience now versus if I were still playing, then I wouldn't have that. The only thing I would have is connection. I would still have that connection and relatability with athletes, which I think helps me in my career currently.
How was that transition from, especially from an injury like that where you tore your ACL, that mentally can have? I've seen people who, I know a few teammates before back in high school that have torn their ACL, and it completely changes how they even approach a lot of things, especially around training. So how did it kind of affect you mentally? That's kind of something I always wanted to know, how someone who went through an injury like that gets back into stuff like training and everything.
In general. So that was actually my third time doing it. So it was almost like riding a bike at that point. But now, I'm 6 years post. I had a knee surgery last June to kind of they say every 5 to 10 years after an ACL surgery, depending on, how you treat your knee, you have to go in there and kind of, manipulate it and clean it up a little bit. But they went in there, everything looked good. And now I'm here a year later, and I actually shot some videos earlier, and I cleaned 300, squatted 400, all those things. But I don't train that way very often, right? Like I've changed the way that I approach training for myself drastically, and I would say the biggest thing is when my wife had our daughter, right?
Yeah.
Because at that point I was, every now and then I'll be a little bit achy, but I'm 30 years old. I'm not trying to be 5, 6 years old and I can't chase her around the yard, right? So I limit my volume, I limit my impact, especially. I'm not a big runner. I never was a big runner. So any like anaerobic capacity work that I do is normally on an erg of some sort. I'm a big fan of the rower. I think that leaves me in the best spot, like for my knee. And then if I'm gonna do anything explosive, I keep the reps where they need to be in short burst like manner.
Yeah, I think one thing that comes from that before we get into the other topics that I have, kind of pulling back, knowing when. I think this is something from your perspective that's really interesting, especially with athletes, is knowing, like you just said, knowing when to pull back that volume. Um, a lot of people, especially in the industry that we're in any type of fitness, a lot of people are always, especially now with gyms reopening, they're going to try to get back and get back quickly. Um,
Right.
but that's not how that's not optimal.
Uh, there's a. It's funny you say that because I feel like I can see things before they happen. And when it comes to the NFL this year, right now we would be 3 weeks into OTAs. So I
Yeah.
normally wouldn't guys right now, but I still do because of this weird circumstance that we're in. Um, there's going to be a lot of soft tissue injuries. The teams are going to get guys at the end of July, maybe early August, hopefully for them, and then they're just going to run full speed ahead because the season still starts September 10th. But
Yeah.
they're not. Well, what I think is going to happen, because they don't care as much about these guys' bodies as they need to, is we have a game in 3 weeks. We got to go now. There's preparation that needs to be done. We're going to do as much as we can in the offseason, get them ready. But when you actually put on the pads and you're actually running 100 plays a team, there's no way that we can simulate that in training, because training is training. And I think there's going to be a lot of hamstrings, there's going to be a lot of quads, there's going to be a lot of calf injuries. And, it's going to be unfortunate, but it's going to be something that teams are going to have to work through this season.
Yeah. I think that's something. I'll take it back to when I was playing lacrosse back in high school, my junior year. It's kind of like you can prep, and I didn't take it as seriously because I didn't expect myself to progress that much, but I actually started performing really well during like our trainings and everything. And then like one day I just didn't decide. I didn't take like stretching as seriously as possible, and I pulled my hamstring. And I was like, well, there goes all my momentum that I ever had. So I've been in that boat where they need you to go full speed and it doesn't work out well, especially when sometimes athletes disregard some minor details when it comes to prepping themselves.
You have not opened up, right, during your off season. Like, you've been doing your footwork and like your little drills, but then you got to go chase down like a 40-yard post, and you got to open up, and your stride length is where it hasn't been since last season. No chance. You have given your body no chance whatsoever.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people spending a lot of time in the weight room, but we're getting to a point now where my guys are starting to transition to more field work, more conditioning, so that we can try to avoid those things.
Awesome. How'd you get into NFL before we get into the training part? How'd you get into, I'm guessing that mini camp had something to do with it, but just from being a D1 player, is that kind of how you got known to train these guys who, I guess we'll get to it now. Like you train George Kittle.
Yeah.
That's probably what you're most known for, who you train. But like, how did you get to know these guys in a way? Is it through experience and stuff?
Yes and no. So I get this question a lot. And I got really good at training ordinary people, like we talked about earlier. I got really good at training Gen Pop. And my early out of school experience was that I was a director of a Parisi speed school. So I worked with middle school and high school athletes. Got really good at taking a high school athlete that wasn't very athletic and making him more athletic. Then I found myself in the position in Nashville. I'm no longer there, but my job there, it was mostly high-end clientele, rich CEO types.
Yeah.
But we'd have athletes trickle through. Well, as the director of that facility, I got a couple of them. And really my first big break was I was working with Eric Decker back in 2016, 2017. And they had a little show, him and his wife on E. So I was on that little show. So we 5 or filming for 3 hours worth of the workout on there, but started that way. George, he actually, when he first came, he was coming with it was Eric, Trent Taylor, and Quentin Patton, and George came in for just 2 weeks. He's coming in for 2 weeks. He was staying with Trent, and then afterwards he asked if he could stay for the next 6 for the off season. That was the year before he broke the record, and then he bought a house here, and ever since then he's obviously been my biggest marketing tool. People come in, and like right now we'd probably have 7 or 8 more guys here than we do, but because of the quarantine, we've kind of got our core 6 or 7. But people come in all the time just to train with him, like they just want to trains, all that stuff. But it's funny because the way we train, it's just different. Like people, they start to do the stuff that he does, and they're like, this dude's strong, or got a motor. And I got to tell him, like, yeah, he runs 90 plays a game. Like he has more snaps than anybody on the field, right? So I spend more time with him than I do most athletes, like on his regen phase. So I'll spend 2 to 3 weeks of like just neuromuscular retraining the body, to signal to the muscles, more muscle activation technique, more mobility work than I do with a free agent or like a 5th or 6th round guy that's he's still trying to peak his performance. George came from Iowa, where they're strong. Iowa, Penn State, you're going to be strong when you leave those places. Look at Barkley. So when I got George, the last thing I wanted to do was load him with 500 or 600 pounds on his back. He had enough of that in college. So I kind of transitioned. We're kind of getting more into like how I program, but I transitioned him into more of like a unilateral approach. I've talked about this on different podcasts before, but I believe that in athletics, the stronger you are from one leg to the next, or the stronger you are from one arm to the next, the more athletic you're going to be, and the more capable you are to produce force in your sport. So if you are a UFC fighter, you have to transition from one leg, power comes through the hips, into one arm on the punch. If you are a football player and you have to sprint, you are sprinting from one leg, like it's one stride, next stride. Change of direction. Think of it like a lateral lunge or like an adductor slide. You are one leg driving back the other direction. I don't care if he can squat 600 pounds. I do care if he can reverse lunge 315 though. And that is something I am very strong, I care very strongly about. And that's how I approach it, right? So his strength, the way we load his spine and the way we load him is typically unilaterally. And it's been great. It's been great for him. There's a couple other athletes we treat that way. And then some, it's just, pretty standard principles. The velocity-based movements, the speed-based movements are first, your power stuff, into your heavy compounds, down into the auxiliaries. Some people can still benefit greatly from a structured strength program. Whereas the things that I do with like George and Rob and Oren, like they're pretty advanced. So I have to grow them through other avenues of their strength that they haven't been exposed to before.
I think right now, at least from my sense too, with like performance, I feel that unilateral training also translates really well to a type of general fitness, I guess, bodybuilding type standpoint, at least for me. I always seem to grow better when I do unilateral movements more than I do. Like, yes, the compound movements do help, but there's a problem with some people who fire muscles in one leg, especially during a squat. You might use one quad more than the other. And if you switch to a Bulgarian split squat, you have no other way to kind of do it than focus in on that muscle in the one leg.
Yeah. I've had 3 knee surgeries, right? So when I back squat, I can't help but favor. When I'm running, like I ran stairs this morning, my left leg, my good leg, was trembling. The person I was running with was like, why is it doing that? It's because I told him, I was like, I'm not really driving much off my right foot, right? But when I get in the weight room and it comes time to do Bulgarians or RDLs or whatever it is, single leg good mornings, you can't hide from it. You can't run from unilateral work. Like you're going to get what you're going to get, and you're going to be exposed if you do have leaks, force leaks or any imbalances. It exposes it very quickly. Double leg press, do 1,000 pounds. Nobody cares. And you can hide your, deficiencies in that.
Yeah. Especially that being a hip dominant movement that can really fuck you up too. If I am allowed to curse on my own show. Just wanted to make sure you know that. But yeah, that one's actually been a huge. That's one where I've seen it. Actually, myself, that's where I've seen it the most is when I do leg presses because my one knee is kind of messed up a little bit from sports from before, but I've transitioned out of doing unilateral more so on a few movements just because I feel better. Um, let's get into more. So let's say, I guess, training for performance. This is literally what you do. You kind of just explained it. Take me through something like, what do you do when you first get the client? Like, do you have that? Like, you video every exercise? Do you look at all their movements? Do you have them do specific sets of drills maybe to
Yeah.
kind of break down their form, see what you can improve, and then that's where you decide what protocol they need to follow?
Yeah. So like my framework includes like repair, rebuild, improve. So I start like my early like regen process or like my testing phase. I don't do a functional movement screen. I don't like it. I don't think it's very functional. It might work for some, doesn't work for me. So I do more of like a controlled articular rotation. So cars, I'll take all of my clients to that, and that'll tell me a lot about what the body's doing, right? So we'll go from that, and then I take people through the same 5 movements. I take them through a reverse lunge, take them through push up, take them through a just a goblet squat, a sled pull. So that tells me a little bit about their hip power, and then a sled push, right? I'll get to like how their upper body pulls and all that stuff later, but I want to see those movements. And from there, that gives me a pretty good idea of how their muscles fire. I can see from their sled drive, like how their running mechanics are minus their arms, and then how powerful they are through their hips. I do always take people through a rowing conditioning. So I'll go 500, 2-to-1 rest ratio on the rower. And I'll see, like, normally I'd like to see you do 3 of those within the same, like, 1-second frame. If you can't get there, then I know that we have a little bit of a conditioning, not an issue, but something we can work on. Right. And then, depending on the person, if you're just incredibly weak, then you're going to be put into a category, which I would call functional performance 2, which is you're a performer, you're an athlete, and you're looking to improve, but you're not elite. Like maybe you're still an NFL athlete, but you don't lift like one yet.
Yeah.
Somebody like George falls under my what it's called elite athlete, right? So with him, my programming is completely different than somebody who's an FP2. FP2 is kind of back to that standard strength protocol. We're always gonna start with the same power movement, power cleans, hang snatch high pulls is something I do, a ton of med ball work. When you get up into George's, it's kind of weird. When you get up into George's realm, we don't catch a lot of cleans. We don't catch a lot of snatches. He can take 315 pounds, and I'd rather him high pull it for 4 or 5 reps and not have to worry about his wrist, whereas the guy over here can probably benefit from the force absorption that he gets from that power clean. And on the flip side, because he's doing the full catch, his primary movements will be a little bit different than George's. And then it's hard it's kind of frustrating for people at times because they want to be doing the same things. But they can't. If you take somebody and you take 3 people and you have them jump off the couch, and we're on like a force plate, right? So you have them jump off the couch, land and produce force. That'll tell me how quick they can absorb that force and reproduce it, right? Well, there's somebody that might squat 600 pounds. He's going to be low and slow and then jump slowly. So I know with that person, I need to work on more fast twitch stuff. Whereas a small wide receiver that's not very strong, he may touch it quickly and jump up, but he didn't have enough power to absorb and reproduce force. Therefore, I got to work on some more sub-maximal strength speed with that guy. And then there's some people that just got it, right? Honestly, yeah. George isn't a guy that's just got it, but he's pretty freaking close. Like he's pretty He's pretty twitchy. He's just an incredibly hard worker too. On top of that, like I
Yeah.
don't think Iowa he had 800 yards in his whole career receiving in Iowa. Right, he's had 2,700 yards in 3 years in the NFL. So it's not like he was just this freak of an athlete that was just outrunning everybody and just mossing people on the field. He's always been a hard worker, and now it's finally starting to show.
And I guess with training with performance too, and you go back to your FP2, um, looking at you go to basic strength movements like the clean
Mhm.
and squat and all that. Do you go back literally all the way to the beginning where maybe you don't even start with the weight? Like a lot of people do this with strength training or
Yeah,
even like Olympic lifting might be different, but a
yeah,
lot of people either start with like a PVC pipe or just the
yeah.
bar.
Uh,
Because that's kind of important to just teach technique.
Um, if I'm talking NFL, college, like high end athlete, 99.9% of the time, they're pretty proficient with the barbell in your hands.
Okay.
Flip side of that, it sounds bad, but you're the one thing that I think helps me a lot compared to some other really good coaches in my area is connection. Right. If I get George on the first day and I'm like, yo, the squat, didn't look great. Squat this broomstick. He's gonna say, take the broomstick and shove it up your ass, like you're fired. Like net, you squat a broomstick. And you can frame it and you can twist it however you want, but you got to make sure that you're on the same page with the athletes and they're respecting what you're doing. Now, I'm running a 12 to 14-year-old strength camp this summer. I'm coming out there with 8 PVC pipes, right? Like I'm capping it at 8 people, and they are all starting with that. They're going to learn how to hinge. They're going to learn how to single leg hinge. They're going to learn how to squat. They're going to learn how to pull. They're going to learn how to triple extend, all with that pipe. And then I'll come out there with some barbells. But somebody that's played Division I football or even high-end high school football and's been around it, while you may have to change their technique a little bit and maybe work on some mobility stuff, the PVC pipes typically not necessary.
Okay. Yeah. I just know sometimes some people's techniques are sometimes off, but I also never been in a football gym,
Yeah,
I guess per se, with a trainer like that. So I would
the
assume
bar
that people in college know what they're doing.
the barbell with some weight can fix a lot of things that like an empty barbell or PVC, it doesn't look good, but you put some weight in it and it helps them kind of open up or they're used to that, right? But what you're talking about would be like I categorize somebody that would be that far regressed or that dysfunctional as active daily performance. And that's just somebody that's looking to improve like their active daily life. Sometimes I get some older population that have had knee replacements. Here's the PVC pipe, right? But yeah, went on a little rant, but yeah, 9 times out of 10 we don't get that far down.
Yeah, I think. And going into more of the training aspect, highly explosive training, I guess, like you've had mentioned basically throughout this whole thing so far, is the name of the game when it
Yep.
comes to sports. You want to take me through the benefits of an athlete maybe starting, like you said, at 12 to 14,
Mhm.
developing those skills with that highly explosive training, uh, and what the benefits are for that person who's in high school that wants to take it to the next level, maybe, and how and then how you transition that to the pros.
Okay.
So when you're looking at, I guess, explosive training, do you work with people who get ready for the combine stuff too?
Yes.
So I'm assuming that explosive training is also very important with that, with the 40-yard dash and everything. So kind of just go into the benefits of it from anybody from a high school athlete all the way up to someone who's going to go into the combine has to perform on that day.
Yeah. So rewinding back to like that high school athlete, one thing that I see a lot of and that I disapprove of is too much explosive training, too much plyometrics, too much triple extension. Um, a lot of these NFL guys that I have working these explosive unilateral movements, these explosive bilateral movements, they've earned the right to do so, right? In anything in life, you got to earn the right to do so. If you can't squat 135 pounds, I don't want to see you power cleaning, right? Like I don't care. I want you to get stronger, right? So there's like within a force velocity curve, like your amount of strength is incredibly important in that curve. Like you have to be strong to produce force, right? Um, mass times acceleration. So if you're not strong enough to move that mass, you ain't going to accelerate it either.
Yeah.
I think it's incredibly important for young athletes to get strong. Not to say that they shouldn't concentrate on those unilateral movements. Like I'm still huge on getting strong through your lunges, getting strong through your single leg squats, getting strong through your single leg posterior chain movements. I still think that really helps them benefit to their sport. But when it comes to the explosive training, it's got to be done in the appropriate manner, right? Because the amount of nervous system work that's required to produce that force is great. Like, it's huge.
Yeah.
People take jump squats and things of that nature for fucking cardio. Like, that's not it. Like, you are looking to produce maximal force for repeated bouts over a short period of time, at the most 10 seconds. And then you got to shut it down. If you show me somebody that can jump on and off the ground 10 times within 15 seconds, the exact same height all 10 times, I'll show you freaking freak of nature. Like, it just doesn't happen. And at that, you're asking, one, for injury, two, for poor movement patterns, and three, just at that, I'm trying to think of what I'm trying to think of here. If you get used to moving something slowly, then that's going to become the new norm. So if you practice being explosive and you're getting tired and lackadaisical because you're just trying to get off the ground, that's going to become the new norm. You want your explosive training to be that explosive, maximal effort every single time. So with my guys, I work in the blocks, right? Like, I got a program coming out called the Alpha Power Method. And there's, within the 8-week program,
All
yeah.
right. All right. You're good to go.
We've done Bulgarian split squats right into jumping split squats. I'm only in this phase for 2 weeks, 2 weeks out of 8. Other than that, you might have 1 or 2 explosive movements out of the 6 or 7 for the whole entire day. And that's because I'm looking, like, we're kind of peaking right now a little bit, and then we're going to deload, and then we'll come back to it. And that's what's a little bit different, I think, about like the combine training. I don't like it because we're physically training them for the test, right?
Yeah.
The test, they don't not like translate to the field, but we're teaching them how to start in these ways that help them run that 40-yard dash only. Whereas, like, the positioning that they're going to be in to play their sport, they can't do that. Or the protocols that we use for the bench press really doesn't make them stronger. We're working on, like, speed endurance at that point, and that's not what these guys need. Like, they need to get stronger and be able to put up repeated bouts of strength, not 50% strength for 25 times. But with that being said, we still implement the same protocols where we are trying to get you as strong as possible and able to turn on that force production for one time, right? And within that, we here, like me and Jeremy, we do a ton of contrast training. So we want you to get as strong as possible and then be able to turn that on for 2 to 3 reps. So like I don't know if you've heard, like, post-activation potentiation. So we utilize the body's ability to potentiate muscle contractions via heavy loads right into an explosive movement. That's one of my personal favorites. I've seen people jump 2 to 3 inches higher on their vertical immediately after. And we've done it with TSU's Pro Day. I mean, I had guys over there in the weight room squatting 400 pounds, walking out there to do their jump 2 minutes later. People thought I was crazy. Jamar jumped 36 inches, and his best in training was 34 and a half. And
Wow.
he just 400 pounds 2 minutes beforehand.
Wow. That's quick recovery.
No, he only did it one time, right? One time, walked out there, and then, I guess it was just increase in signaling, and, nerve fibers were signaling more efficiently because of that, and he was able to jump higher. The same thing goes for the 40-yard dash. We will have guys drive a sled for 5 yards 2 to 3 minutes before they go, and then they're at it. Little hacks like that, I think, go, sight unseen for a lot of coaches and a lot of athletes. But, the different methods that I use for power can really be beneficial for one or two times. But when it comes to increasing athletic performance, there's got to be more to it than these little hacks here or there.
So is there any of the performance, I guess, tests you would say in the combine that, from what I've heard, it's always the jump,
Yeah.
like basically the long jump is the one that decides a lot for an athlete. Is that basically the most important one out of them all, in your opinion, or are they
I,
all just not as important as when it comes to like something like doing a pro day?
I think for football, it's probably the one that shows you the most. Like, you're looking at horizontal power. Like, you have to be able to run. You have to be able to jump. Like, you're running through people with your hips all sport long, right?
Yeah.
And that's best test for that we have. You also you can't fake it. There's no gimmicks. There's no secret tactics. There's no tucking your shoulder blade for the vert. There's none of that. Like, you're going to stand there and you are going to be as strong and explosive as possible and go as far out.
Yeah.
And that George did. I jumped 10-11 at 253 pounds, right? So again, he was a freak. They just didn't use him right at Iowa, which is probably good because they probably would have smashed Penn State. Just kidding.
Well, I think we have a tight end that I think you need to get in touch with, aka Pat Fryermuth, whenever he goes. That's a side note, but he's like, I saw him play. I don't think I've seen anybody close to what he's doing. Like that guy's a freak. That guy's actually a freak on the field. When I look at him for how tall he is and how he moves, I was kind of freaked out when he came to Penn State. Like, he's just a beast on the field. So we'll see.
Good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think it changes much. Like, we get to training for performance. There's not a huge aesthetic component to it that we concentrate on. Like, naturally they eat pretty good, they train pretty frequently, they condition, so like body fat and muscle aesthetic, like, it's there. Like, they're not like the biggest freak of nature's looking, because they don't care how many times they can lateral raise or whatnot. But we do spend time within like hypertrophy phases. Like, we do try to increase capacity within the muscle fiber, right? Like, within that, we can get you stronger if we can get you a little bit bigger. So we do train that way early on in the off season. Okay. But we've only got a couple more weeks of anything other than we're starting to transition into getting ready for football, right? Like, right now, it's been different. We're finishing up this power phase, which I had to extend because we're not in quarantine. So like, as soon as we're in quarantine, as soon as I found out that we weren't going back the last week of April, I extended their strength phase another 2 weeks and then pushed back the power phase. I felt we could do it. So we did a deload week, 2 more weeks of strength, and then we're on our second week of power. And then I get to write a whole nother program, which is because normally 6 to 8 weeks, then 3 to 4 weeks. But I'll have them all the way until the last week of July. So I'll be able to do a whole nother 8-week block, which at this point will be a little bit triphasic emphasis. But instead of a heavy eccentric load on the front side, we're gonna load it heavily eccentrically, but we're not going to prolong it. So we'll only do 2 weeks of eccentrics, 3 weeks isometrics, then 3 weeks in the power phase. So that's the way I plan on structuring the next 8 weeks. Normally, like within Cal Dietz, he does 4 to 5 weeks eccentric, 4 to 5 weeks isometric, and then shorter on the power. But I'm trying to get these guys ready. So I feel most of them are stronger. George front squatted his max from last year 3 times last week. So I know he's stronger. I just want to make sure that he can move things quickly at the very end before he leaves.
Awesome. And I think one thing, I guess you brought up a deload phase. I guess this goes into kind of how does explosive training affect the joints, and then go into your recovery, kind of, if you have any methods like that you want to give away that kind of help with recovery with these athletes. Deload is one big one with any type of general fitness. I think a lot of people have it wrong for how often you need to when it comes to general fitness. But when it comes to athletes, I feel like the deload is a lot more important, especially you don't want to risk injury. So kind of go how it affects the joint, how it affects like joints and muscles, and then go into more of the recovery phase for you.
So we deload after every 4 weeks, unless I have some signs like auto regulation. Like I can tell when people need it. Like I know their numbers, I know their percentages, like I know their vibes, right? Like if vibes are down, I know it's time, right?
Yeah.
But within our deloads, we kind of go back to a one of those regen weeks that we were talking about, but with a little bit of intensity, if that makes sense. So I always start the session with, all right, here's what we got. We've only got 4 movements, but don't get it twisted. We're still going to move weight during this time, right? But we're still going to start with some cars, still going to start with some more ankle mobility. We're going to do those things so that, like you said, the joints have time to recover. But we also want to lubricate those joints by promoting blood flow around the area, right? Like you can't just sit on your ass for a week. That's the last thing you need to do. You got to move. We drop percentages and we drop load, right? So, or we drop percentages and we drop volume. So highest I'll go is about 70%. So I might go 70% for 3x3s. Still looking for speed on the bar at that point though, because we are only doing 70 and we're only doing 9 reps of that movement for the day. And we drop from 4 days a week to 3. And that's how they know that it's like a true deload. And don't call me on Wednesday or Thursday and want to do something because we ain't doing it. Right. Like I have to force them. But most of my guys do a really good job. I have a physical therapist partner down here, so they go 4 days a week to him anyways. So at that point, we make sure that they keep that same routine going down there. We'll change from more of a activation slash like recovery into straight recovery and just like modalities that they'll use. So they'll increase the cupping, increase the needles, increase like acupuncture during that time. Because a lot of times we'll have them in, as much as acupuncture and dry needles are great, if you do them daily, they promote a recovery response. Like all the pricking, all the needling promotes blood flow. Well, within that, you could be a little bit sore, right? And then you come into the workout the next day, like, oh, my shoulder's a little bit sore, which sucks, right? So
Yeah.
now like, we've dropped that down to like 2 to 3 days a week max on that type of modality. But on the deload week, hit it as much as you want. Do the things like that as much as you need. That way you get all of that recovery as possible. And then I think the biggest thing that goes underutilized is carbohydrates after your workout. Athletes, I gotta get my protein in. I'm like, yeah, you gotta get your protein in, but if you don't get your freaking carbs in, you're gonna be in a freaking sympathetic state all day long. So
Yeah.
get your where your cortisol freaking relaxes, and you can get into a recovery mode, right? Some of my guys, they go straight to like blue light glasses for a little bit. Kind of helps like calm them a little bit, and like the transmission. That I don't know if that stuff works, but George and Rob do that, which is fine. And then Norman Tech boots, they jump into those almost immediately after. That's about it. I mean, no secret sauce. If we had like cold tubs and infrared sauna, we would be utilizing that. We're all closed up right now though. So right now we're stuck, but Norman Tech boots, hyper ices, Theraguns, things of that nature to kind of just get things moving a little bit and get the recovery process started a little bit sooner.
Now, with their nutrition, do they, like you just mentioned, carbs after training? Do they have carbs like intra workout too? Are these guys fueling while they're working out, or are they going off, or is it more kind of you're looking at it from the point where maybe during a game they might not be fully taking in carbs or something like that? I don't know how
Ah,
athletes kind of utilize it, but just wanted
ah,
to.
3. So George Rob in school, all take carbs intra. Just I guess they prefer it, and then like 3 or 4 of the other guys, they don't need it, or they've never done it before. But I know George during the game, like he takes like 2 chews every quarter. But he's also running 90 to 100
Yeah.
snaps a game. Come July, when we're conditioning, like at that point we'll be going an hour on the field right into an hour in the weight room. Right now we're split days, or at least split times. At that point we'll probably have to implement that with everybody across the board, just to increase performance and like make sure that everybody's feeling good. It's going to be hot too. That kind of changes the game a little bit. But I like intra carbs, but a lot of people, they feel like it makes them full. And I'm like, freaking flavorless carbs. Like, you're fine. Drink some Gatorade. But, people have their ways. And, I've been lucky enough to get them to take cytocarb afterwards. So, baby steps with them.
Yeah, no, I do. I do Gatorade in between during my
Yeah.
workout.
Yeah.
That's like my preferred choice. Just goes right down the hatch, real
Yeah.
quick, digests easily. Um, and then there's something interesting that kind of came up, I guess, in the past few, want to say the past few weeks of someone kind of important training. He goes by the name LeBron. No one knows what this video is. Just type in like LeBron squat and you'll find it on Twitter or something. A lot of people are absolutely tearing LeBron apart for the exercise that he is doing. It is a squat, but it's for a different reason, and I think you can probably understand what he's probably doing better than
He
I
was doing
could. Yeah, it was like he was doing more of like, it seemed like he was doing kind of a mix of a good morning and like a
yeah.
squat. And I think I understand like his back, like my buddy mentioned it. He's like, his back kind of looks like a banana. And I was like,
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, I'm kind of going to laugh at that, but I'm like, it's probably for a different purpose than we understand. I'm like, LeBron has the best trainers for a reason. He's a millionaire. He performs. So I'm like, I think his trainers know what he's doing, hopefully. But kind of go into, if you've seen that video, kind of go into like maybe why some people always are judging kind of athletes for the way that they use movements. Like a lot of athletes you see aren't doing movements exactly correct, but it's more for the explosiveness like we've been talking about.
The different core aspects of it. And I think that's more of what he was going for. Most of his training is like kind of tailored around that. It kind of goes back to, he was kneeling on a Bosu ball doing overhead presses, or this squat movement in which I I don't know as much on the squat. I can justify the kneeling on the Bosu ball a little bit, but the squat, he had kind of had me thrown a little bit. But I'm not like, I don't know. I'm not within the program. I don't know like what, like any phase or what like the focus of the day was, right? Without knowing any of those things, as a coach, I can't really judge. I can't really talk about it. I have seen some stuff like Alvin Kamara was doing a overhead. So he was doing barbell overhead, 2 kettlebells, like kind of, we call it crazy press, but he had 2 kettlebells hanging from bands, and somebody was pushing the barbell and it was going side to side. That I just think is a circus act. And of course it ended up on ESPN. There's no real benefit to it other than you're asking for an AC joint or a rotator cuff to explode. Really kind of the same thing with the kneeling squat or the kneeling overhead press. I mean, he was overhead pressing 12 or 15 pounds while kneeling on a ball, which is great. But if you're trying to get your shoulders stronger, he's probably better to be on a stable surface in which he can probably press 50 or 60 pounds in each hand and save the core for later, right?
Yeah.
Balance can be a proponent of your strength. Same thing with core, but they don't typically need to be mixed too much, right? Like if you're going to do an overhead press, just do an overhead press somewhere where you can actually work for strength or work for power, versus at that point, he was just trying to survive on the ball. He was literally just like, please don't fall, please don't fall. And I got these things in my head, like, don't fall. And you see a lot of that, but again, like I try not to look too much into it. You won't typically see me post any, I'll call it fluff. Like I'm team no fluff. There's not going to be much of that goes on around me. I'm pretty much a simple strength guy. I try to follow like principles that have been around for a long time. I've kind of manipulated those in my own way, taken pieces of Joe DeFranco, Jay Ferrugia, Ed Kern, Kurt Hester, and kind of molded that into my own principles. Like I have my own methods within my principle, but all of those guys pretty much have a very solid foundation of strength training that they've kind of, spun off into their own way. They're not balancing with one hand on their head or anything, trying to get people to become more athletic. I promise you. And that's just kind of my style. There's a lot of people that do like that unorthodox style. Like I've seen people squatting on unstable surfaces, uneven surfaces, deadlifting on unstable surfaces, deadlifting with more weight on one side, squatting with more weight on one side of the bar, like a lot of different things. And maybe you can justify it's a little bit harder on the core, oblique, but it's also harder on the spine and your lumbar, right? So there's a lot of stuff out there, and maybe there's a place for it, but within my weight room, you're not going to see much of that.
Yeah. And I think that goes into kind of I guess you built all your methods around these other people, but you
Yeah,
made it individualized for what you want to teach. And I think that goes into kind of your business standpoint. First way that if no one knows how we met, but I kind of met Josh on a call with Jason Phillips and a few other big names. And kind of starting your business though, kind of just go into a little business talk real quick, because I think it's really interesting on how people start. Like, how did you start, like, come and make your own performance training kind of, I guess, center, if you call it, um
uh,
for yourself, right out of your garage, it seems like, but kind of just making it your own business in a
yeah.
sense.
I got somebody asked me, or it was either on another podcast or a Q&A, and they, I was live the other day, and somebody said, if you're early on in your career, should you go to a big box gym to try to generate clients and get experience? And I took the opposite route. I went to I worked for free for the first 3 years. I did college internships and graduate assistants. So that gave me a ton of experience. And then I went to a small training program called Parisi Speed School. Bill Parisi. At one point they had 80 or 90 locations, but that gave me enough experience hands-on with people, which I think was great. And within that, we were tied into a health club, which gave me the opportunity to have to approach somebody out in the and explain my service, right? So that was another big step. And then the biggest thing that I think helped me was my last job before I broke off on my own. And I was working with a orthopedic surgeon and physical therapist. And we kind of had a model where it would go from the ortho, whether you had a surgery or you just came in with an injury, to PT. And then on the backside of PT, they would come over to train with the strength coaches. So that really helped me, because I would have to approach people on a table after an ACL injury, like, hey, how's it going? I'm Josh Cuthbert. I've been where you are before. Here's the things that I can do to help you avoid this table again. We can get you bigger, faster, and stronger, right? So that taught me more about selling my services to somebody out in the open, which was great. And that, I think, really helped me when it comes time to close, right? Like, everybody has leads, everybody has lead gen, but it's the ability to close that lead is what separates most coaches in this industry, because you don't get many opportunities, right? Like, you have to take advantage of that opportunity and seal the deal. Which brings me to client retention. So I don't know many people that started their own personal training business or sports performance business that haven't been somewhere else before. And that's why when I went to open a facility this past year with Jason, we decided in the short term against it, because I was scared of people like me. Like, I took Eric Decker, I took Trent, I took Quentin, I took George, I took everybody, right? They all
Yeah.
came with me, left the facility in which they were training, and they came with me. And I think that's how most people get started, though, right? Like, a lot of the good coaches here were at D1 or Velocity before in this area, and they kind of had their ride or dies that came with them. And then at that point, it's a little bit of your marketing techniques locally, if you want to run Facebook ads or boost posts, whatever you want to do to try to generate some leads. But 9 times out of 10, if you're a personal trainer or a strength coach, your numbers, probably 25 to 30 sessions a week, is probably where you want to live. You want to provide a really good service, and you can get there by word of mouth. And that's 90%, 95% of what I've done. I just had another phone consultation with somebody yesterday. I don't know who the person is, but their son's friend trained with me back in 2017, and they saw on Instagram or whatever that I'm still training and I'm in the area and they want to start. Cool, great. Here's what I got. Yeah, and that's where I'm at right now. I've tried to bring help on before, and I love the quality of the service that I provide, which is it's hard. It makes it hard for me to scale that way because I can only train so many people, right? Like the way I've scaled now is by coupling people together and grouping people up. Still charging pretty much the same thing, but as a coach, my scaling abilities go into online services and like program writing. Like that's how I've been able to scale over the past year versus I'm going to try to see 55 people this week because that's how you end up burned out and that's how you end up wanting to sell insurance instead
Yeah.
of training. I was at one point I was training a lot, 60 to 70 hours a week, and that was a lot. It's a lot for anybody to try to do.
Yeah. Think even as I guess I take it more of like I did the free coaching for a little bit, and then I have my first paying client right now. But it's just honestly, online training is really difficult in a sense too. No matter which one you do, I think a lot of people underestimate. Like there's like a lot of people say it's an easy way to introduce yourself to make money, kind of, because there's no real barrier to entry in it, especially in the industry we're in. You don't really need a certification to do it. You don't really need anything. You kind of can just call yourself an online fitness coach and you're there. But I think it's a lot more difficult when people realize how much work goes into it, especially with how personalized you have to get with things.
Yep.
Like these are people's bodies. It's not like you're doing something that's pretty easy, like making a product. It's like it's not just a program. It's like you're personalizing like nutrition and that for somebody. So your nutrition has to be so specific to the individual.
Yeah, I'm not a I don't like one-on-one online clients. It's not my jam. I like connecting with people like on like a deeper level. So I've made a little bit of a pivot into I'm gonna do group training, not group training, but um, I'm gonna run group so I'm gonna run a program. I'm gonna take 10 people within this program, like the Alpha Man method or whatever, and I'm gonna take 10, and then we'll get together 2 to 3 days a week where we can really connect. We can all talk about it. We can all share, and that's where I would rather be versus, hey man, can I change this movement today? Or hey man, like I'm not really feeling good today. Like can I do this differently? Or hey, I stubbed my toe and like I weighed a pound more yesterday. So like what's going on here? Like that's not for me. I would rather write programs, sell them in the masses, or take, groups of 5 to 10 and run a program with them.
Yeah.
That's
You're still taking the Jason Phillips absolute connection based type approach. I think it goes into all sorts of fields and I can't recommend it enough. I mean, I'm in NCI right now. So
yeah,
it's like, so I'm learning exactly what I need to learn, hopefully, to make change. And it's been working for the clients as I'm improving. But also kind of on that point real quick, we'll end with this little topic real quick is kind of making, I guess this goes against you because I was like, it might be important for athletes trained to be as individual as possible, but I guess that's only when it's elite, including, I guess, with the way you want to train. It's kind of grouping people together and specifying a specific program for a group of people for
yep.
kind of a basis, for kind of a specific, what am I looking for? Demographic of people. So kind of go into why why then it might not be important, especially from an athlete, I guess, perspective. We kind of gone over it, but touch one more time on it. Why it might not be important to get as personalized with athletic training as it is for something like you say, like Gen Pop or something like that.
I think because people they overthink how specific football training or basketball training or baseball training, all those things need to be, right? Like the the point is to increase athleticism. Like you can take somebody that runs really well on a baseball field. Well, guess what? They're going to run really well on the football field, right? Like increasing speed and increasing change of direction is increasing speed and increasing change of direction. The movements from sport to sport or from athlete to athlete can be a little bit different. Like I do run these groups, but yesterday I had 2 guys doing trap bar deadlifts, 2 guys doing front squats, 2 guys were doing box jumps, 2 guys were doing band assisted contrast jumps. Like they're still within the group of 4. I might have 2 different things going just based on the athletes. Like I had 2 offensive linemen and 2 wide receivers. All 4 of them aren't going to do the same thing. The end goal is to try to increase performance with all 4 of them, right? The movement patterns are very similar. The modality in which I choose to implement with that athlete is what differs, right? And that's how I program across the board, gen pop all the way through. If it's an upper body push, lower body pull day, or if it's a upper body push, upper or lower body push day, I know that I have a progression and a regression all the way down to a TRX assisted squat, all the way up to a barbell jump squat, all the way through. So the movement patterns are the same, but how I implement them in the modality that I choose is what differs from athlete to athlete, from program to program. So when I take, like yesterday's lift was our lower body power day, right? So I put on the board front squat / this movement. And then I knew exactly, I was telling these guys, this is what you got. These guys, this is what you got. So they're still looking to improve their vertical power, but how we choose to go about that is a little bit different based on the athlete. And that's kind of the way I'm able to group these guys together, but still run, individualized to them as much as I can while still running them in a group, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes plenty of sense. It seems like it makes it easier, honestly.
Yeah.
Hearing it from your aspect. So we're at the end of the episode. I kind of end with the same 3 questions. I ask every single guest these same 3. First one is, if you want people to leave this podcast with 3 things, what would those 3 things be?
First thing is training for power is not training for conditioning. Second thing is get stronger through your unilateral movements. Third thing is, if you want to be successful in this field as a coach, get really good at coaching ordinary people first. You're not going to skip straight to professional athletes. I didn't do it. Anderson didn't do it. Tim Glover didn't do it before he got with MJ. I promise you, he trained 12-year-old kids first, and he got really good at it. He built their trust. He built a reputation, and then he got there.
Awesome. And then second question, what 3 books would you recommend everybody read?
Atomic Habits is great.
That's the one I'm reading right now.
From a training perspective, I like Triphasic Training by Cal Dietz. And then let's see, number 3, Man Up by Bedros Kewallen. I don't know how to say Bedros' last name.
Yeah, I don't know how to say it either. Caroline or something, I think it is. Sure. And then last thing, kind of shameless plug yourself. Where can people find you? If they want to ask you any questions, talk about training, if they want to sign up for anything, your time to just go ahead and tell people where to find you.
Instagram is what I use the most. I'm not a huge social guy, but Cuthbert _training. If you're interested in some of the programs that I put together, alphapowermethod.com would have some of those on there. And then if you want to just get at me, then slide into my DMs and we can talk about training. Literally, I'll answer, 9 times out.
Yeah, he answered pretty quick.
I try to answer as best I can. And if we get into a training discussion, don't come at me with a question and not expect to have a conversation.
Awesome. Josh, first off, I want to say thank you for coming on the show. And before you guys all leave, like usual, if you guys did enjoy listening to this podcast, please screenshot, tag Josh and I, put it on your stories. I love showing people the love back when it comes to my listeners, and definitely go give Josh a follow because he's doing some pretty cool stuff. And if you don't know who George Kittle is, you might need to look that one up because he was kind of a main topic point on this one, and you probably should know who he is if you watch NFL at all. So Josh, thank you for coming on the show, and thank you everybody for listening to this episode of the Ace of Spada podcast.
Sure, thanks.